Hi, and welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show. We are here waking up the world, and we have been on this journey, and something happened, but it didn't happen this year, and it didn't happen in this life. It happened in my mama's life, my grandmama's life. Those are things that we don't usually talk about because sometimes we don't even know about. But let's go and heal and walk a path out of generational trauma with my friend Antoinette Terrel. So please help me welcome her to the studio. Hello, hello. There you are. I can almost see you. There, I can see you.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I am well. This is such magic that we have with the technology.
I know. This is great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are very, very welcome. When it comes to, all right, this is a serendipitous moment because we met through the current online speed dating kind of thing, but it wasn't social media. It was my affiliation with a chamber of commerce. So, hey, it happened to be a holistic chamber of commerce, and you just stumbled across my stuff and said, hey, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, I'll talk to anybody. No, I was very, very pleased to be able to make a new connection. And it was unusual for me. Most people don't pick up the phone and call.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you picked up the email, I think, first, but however it was, we connected. So that led to a conversation about what I'm up to and my saying, I don't know, you got an idea, I think you'd be fun to interview. And you said no.
I did.
You said no.
I did.
And I accepted that. And then a little funky thing happened with my summit. And by the way, anybody who hosts anything live, I had someone who said, I can't do it, Jackie. And I'm like, okay, it's going to work out. It always does. And that very same day, I got your message that said, hey, is there still space?
That's right. That's right. I did.
Yeah. So I'm so grateful. So grateful. Pardon me. Now that I have taken care of what happens when I rush, the conversation about generational trauma, when did you start becoming aware that this was a topic you wanted to talk about?
I've always talked about it. I've always talked about generational trauma. It's I was a single mom, and as soon as I became a single mom, I knew that whatever happened before me does not continue with my child. And so I've instilled that very young in her, that it ends with her, whatever that is. And so I became self-aware as soon as I got pregnant with her. So very much so. And I raised her in that sense. I raised her in that way of understanding, that our future doesn't have, our past doesn't have to dictate our future. So I was very aware of all that stuff early on.
All right. So there's this moment in a story where I go, there's more here. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So single mom.
Yes.
All right. So from single mom to single mom, what happened to the ideal of we're going to be together and grow old together and raise our kids together?
Okay. This is great. So I was, in college, in, full-time student, got together and fell in love and, got pregnant. But I learned early on that our relationship wasn't a match. And I wanted to, I needed to get out. And so I was 5 months pregnant when I decided to leave. I didn't have any relationships with my own parents. I didn't have any relationship with any relatives. I didn't have any friends or friends. And so I was pregnant, homeless, jobless, all at the same time. So, so it was very, I just knew that you know, that's when I found, you know, that's when I'm a believer, and that's when Jesus just, you know, my cousin said, give Jesus a try. And I was just overcome with that sense of peace, knowing that Jesus was going to take care of me in that moment, and that, you know, that everything was going to be okay in whatever that is. But yeah, it's interesting to see, you know, how being a single parent, I just knew that it was going to be her and me against the world, and I was going to do whatever it takes to make sure she was safe. So when I became a mom, I took myself out of the equation. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't focus on me. I had to focus on her. And then knowing that my background and past and experience, if you will, you know, I just wanted to do something different, something better for her.
Okay, so you alluded to this. We're going to go there a little bit because we're
Okay.
talking generational trauma. You
Yes,
said you did not have family
correct,
relationships. You
correct.
had the one cousin, you
Yes.
know, thank God. But your family of origin, as they say, was not present in your life when you were a college student.
Not at all. I didn't have a good relationship with any of my family members, my parents at all, not at all. So I was just alone. And you know, before I got pregnant with her, I was trauma. You know, my life was trauma, so much trauma. My feelings, you know, I was trauma, and you know, there was just so much trauma and emotional instability. So
Yeah, you got to give us another word other than trauma. So, what was it like living in this traumatic
chaos.
emotional chaos?
Yeah, that's
How did
all I knew.
chaos? You were a college student. How did chaos show up in your life?
That's all I knew because, well, okay, I'm a child abuse survivor. I'm a domestic abuse survivor. So that's all I knew. You know, I'm a recovered drug addict. That's all I knew from, you know, from a young age until you know, I was a college student. I knew nothing else, but that's where it all started from. But when I got pregnant with her, and I was a single mom, I knew that I didn't want to continue that for my child.
Ah, got it. Okay. So you made a decision you don't want to continue it.
Correct.
You found a place of faith that you could rest.
Correct.
Then what happened?
Oh, that wasn't, you know,
Come on, it didn't end there and everything
it didn't.
became puppy dogs and roses and butterflies.
You know what? It didn't. Gosh, it didn't end there. You know, I just started, you know, I remember just sitting when I was pregnant with her, just saying, okay, it's just me. I was just overcome with love, you know, just this love and peace. But I just knew that I needed to do some steps. So there were a couple of people that were in my life at the time that, you know, angels, right? Somebody took me in who had no relation to her father and I, and just said, you know what, you know, if you need a place to stay, I'll come take care of you. Right. So she took me in and I lived with her during the last trimester. And then, you know, of course, I did turn back to my parents because that's all I knew while you know, when I was delivering. So I ended up living with my mom right after I delivered her. But it was challenging. But there's so much trauma just because my parents were traumatizing, if you will. And they just they didn't parent the way I felt that I needed to be parent. And I didn't want to instill that or put my daughter in that type of environment. So there was just it was just chaotic.
So you were at a place of peace, making the adult decision of how am I going to support my kid?
Yes.
And now you're in a place of drama and trauma and chaos.
Yes. Yes.
So what
Unfortunately.
happened?
Then after, you know, I went back to work. I found a full-time job through a friend you know, another friend who we're still good friends today. And I got a full-time job, and, you know, my daughter went to the daycare on site. And that's when I just started to, you know, have a sense of peace. I just knew that it was just time to grow up and just take care of my daughter. So that's how it happened, really.
It's called motivation.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
was definitely motivated, and I was just determined to make her life better, just her life better, without thinking that I was in the right, it was also helping me, but I didn't know at the time.
Ah, you didn't know at the time.
Correct, I didn't.
That, those are going to be famous last words, I got a feeling, as we go on this journey. How old is your daughter now?
27.
Oh my God, I would never have guessed. All right, so 27 years later, we've got this whole nother story. How long did it take before you established your own place?
Okay, so I ended up having a roommate who was also a single mom, and both of our kids were the same age. And then I met my husband. So my husband has been in my, in our lives since she was 2. And then I found my own place. I mean, I literally woke up one day living with this roommate, and I said, okay, I need to have my own space without thinking. I mean, it all happened in a weekend. I just, an apartment down the street. I moved in, and then I met my husband.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this all happened within a couple of, when she was 2. And then we were together and, for like 5 years before we decided to move forward in our relationship. So he practically helped me raise her in that sense. But yeah, it's interesting to talk about that now.
It's the power of a decision.
Absolutely.
It's the power of a decision. Now, we're talking about a concept of making the decision to leave behind the chaos.
Yes. Yes.
And then there was healing. So let's talk about the shift, because we're talking about healing, generational trauma here.
Yes.
And so, did you have any relationship with your parents once you moved out?
So, once I moved out and, yes. And the interesting thing about that is, they would see how I parent, they observed, if you will, they observed how I parent my daughter, and they were just so proud because, I remember them saying, "Oh, look at you, Antoinette. You're the way your daughter is. She was a good kid. She was easygoing, and so they saw, oh, look at her. She's such a great kid. When she was young, and so they were proud of me. But the healing really didn't start there. I think it only true healing began probably about 5 or 6 years ago, to be honest."
What I absolutely appreciate honesty, because the elephant in the room is that things don't often happen in ways that are nice, neat, and clean.
Correct.
Especially, I mean, we're humans. So we are like round objects hitting round objects, It doesn't always go the way it did in fairy tales.
Yeah, no, it wasn't an easy journey. But yeah, after my husband and I got married, we found ourselves, we owned a business, and it was just the 3 of us. It was the 3 of us for a long time. Because then we had my son, but my kids are 12 years apart. So there's a lot of things that happened in that 12 years. But yeah, anyway.
No. You don't get to open loops like that on my show. We get to talk about it. All right. So a lot of things that happened in those 12 years.
Okay. So after my husband and I got together, the trauma or the curses continued, if you will. I thought I was at a point where, my relationship with my parents, was in a better spot, in a better place. But because they weren't healing, even though I was sort of healing, it wasn't, we weren't connecting, right? We weren't fine, there wasn't I don't know what the word is, I'll come back to that. But we didn't have a connection. We weren't in the same place. So as I continued to, move forward in my life with my husband and daughter, and then I get pregnant with my son, in between that time, it was touch and go. And I remember just having fights with my parents, it's like seasonally, right? you would have an argument with, I would have this argument with my parents seasonally. And it was just, all of a sudden you start to realize the cycle, right? The cycle of the same type of arguments, the same, it was just, that's when you're like, okay, there's a lot of, I just wanted off that roller coaster of trauma, chaos.
Because you weren't going anywhere. It was just the
Correct.
loop of a roller coaster.
Absolutely. It was just the loop. Yes.
So there's power in being able to stand back far enough to see the pattern.
Yes. So much power. And that actually happened maybe about 6 years ago when I said, okay, I'm done. I don't want any part of this. But it's like a breakup. It's like when you break up, you know, you're literally breaking up with your family, and you're just you're creating healthy boundaries for myself because of all that chaos, and you're just breaking up with your family, and that's very painful. But I was just done. I was just done, and I said, okay, enough is enough. And so that's when the true healing began.
So that's really interesting, because making that decision doesn't necessarily lead to action or healing.
Correct.
What was the action that you took?
Well, I mean, I knew that so I started going to, there's a, because I'm a recovered drug addict, and I knew that I needed healing. I went through Celebrate Recovery, it's like it's a faith-based organization to help, with hang-ups, hurts, and habits, hang-ups, hurts, and habits. And so I needed support in that sense. So I started attending that. I just started reading a lot of books, personal development books. And, I just started going to church. That's when the true healing began for me. If that answers that question.
Well, it does. And it begs for more questions, because we all have the support systems that help us walk through, especially things like this. And for you to have found a support system that would support you as you were setting a boundary, walking away, and that was really what I was curious about, was with your parents.
Yes.
How did you communicate to them that you were done? Yeah, that's the conversation I want to have.
It wasn't pleasant, but I just said, okay, I'm done. I literally, that was it. I said, I'm done. And I cut off all ties with my family, every single one of them. Whether Facebook, on social media, blocked all their cell phone numbers, blocked all their emails. It was very intentional, because that is the type of boundaries that I needed to heal. And that's what helped me. So I isolated myself purposely from the people who I needed to break that cycle from, if you will.
So it was not just a breakup. It was an absolute decision. There wasn't any iffiness about this, it sounds
There
like.
was no iffiness. I just knew, I was done. I was just completely done, and I needed out. And so, I blocked everyone. I mean, siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. Anybody that had any connection to them, I was just done, because I needed to focus on why I was always feeling that way. And so I learned that was the best way to do it.
Okay. You focused on why you were always feeling that way.
Yes.
What is that way? What does that mean?
Anger.
Okay.
I was always angry. I had anxiety. I was depressed. I was sad. I mean, I didn't feel good about myself. I was just, I was a mess. And I needed to find out why. I needed to learn. I needed to find out who Antoinette was again, who the true Antoinette is. And that's what I did.
That's really a gutsy move. I mean, very few of us take that kind of decisive action.
That's
Yeah, so
that's not easy, because you're literally, it's like a breakup. It really is. And you know, when you have this, oh gosh, with your parents and siblings and cousins that you grew up with, and you have this long relationship, but yet the familiarity, you
mm-hmm.
know, and you're trying to, it's not an easy task. It's a brave thing to do, but it's painful. It's extremely painful to do. And I was just done. I was done. The pain was just too much.
Yeah, so the pain that you were in staying in the relationship was greater than the pain you experienced ending that relationship, which is often how we have to get to before we could end a relationship.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is a very brave journey. And it was brave when you did it. As far as I'm concerned, it's even braver now that you're sharing it. And I greatly appreciate the fact that you are, because the inability to take decisive action on this kind of traumatic chaos that you were experiencing in your life, that inability can be so debilitating. You know, we're talking about zero tolerance, and you're talking about a story where you tolerated family-based drama, trauma, and chaos for a long time after you moved out of the house.
For a long time, for a very long time.
And so I know nature abhors a vacuum, and that there's a bunch of things that could have happened after you had that decisive action. What did happen?
I went to therapy. I went to talk therapy, I knew probably a year and a half into that decision that I was done, that I needed to go to therapy. Actually, I knew probably when I was in my 20s and 30s that I needed to go to therapy. I did go to therapy, but not as, intentional, ready to do the work kind of thing. So within that in 2015, 2016, I knew I needed to go to see a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So by 2016, I said, okay. And I was going to this therapist 3 days a week for a couple of years, because I was in so much pain. I was just so unhappy. I cried all the time. At that time, I didn't know, like, I couldn't forgive. I couldn't let go of the stuff that happened to me when I was growing up. Like, all that stuff started to manifest, in 2016.
When you say manifest, you mean the memories started to bubble up and you were
Absolutely.
able, okay.
Just, the first time I got hit, the first time, I started doing drugs, the first time of everything, and it just was too much. The pain was too much to bear. And so I went to talk therapy. I started going 3 days a week. I still continued to read. And then, I also needed to do this for my present, for my family. I needed to become a better mom. I needed to become a better wife. And just, I didn't want to continue on that destructive chaos into my current, to my marriage.
Yeah. That was the decision you made with your daughter before she was born, that you didn't want her to have that experience. And so now you are taking a set of actions to change that experience again, even more so.
Absolutely. I wanted to become, my grandparents were divorced. My parents were divorced. Divorce almost happened in my own marriage. My daughter doesn't have her parents together. I didn't want my son to go through that, and also, I didn't want to continue that on, because it's such an easy thing to do. It really is, running away.
Ah, yeah. So What did you run towards? When you stopped running away, what did you run towards?
Love. I ran towards love. I ran towards peace. I ran towards Jesus. I ran towards letting go of the old and closing the door to that, welcoming the new. And even it's, I'm so comfortable. I was comfortable in chaos, right? And then when you're transitioning over to the peace, that's not easy because it's different, but it's not wrong. So I just needed to transition over, and that's what I was running to. And that's what I learned. Just because you're comfortable in the chaos doesn't, and mentally that you want out, doesn't mean that the goodness is wrong or it's bad. And I was just ready. I was just ready to accept whatever it is, because it had to be better. It had to be better.
There's got to be something better than this. Yeah, great song. And so that's the point that you were at, is that there's got to be something better than this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. And I love the fact that you didn't have to have it clearly defined, what you were running towards. As far as what it was actually going to look like, other than you knew you wanted your family to stay together.
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted love. I wanted to focus on the love, the happiness of my husband, my children. It wasn't about me, right? I just knew that I needed to show up better for them. So in being able to help serve them and being able to show up as a better wife and as a better mom.
When did you start putting yourself into the mix again?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Probably in the last 4 years. I just wanted to create more create more memories with my family. I took a leap of faith, and just wanted to just experience more fun with them. So about 4 years ago, I just decided, I took a leap of faith and just wanted to insert myself back in, if you will.
That's really, really a beautiful story. It's a really beautiful story. So while all of this chaos and all of this shift and all of these transitions were going on in the background, you and your husband are running a business.
So my husband and I, yes. So we used to run a business for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, when all that trauma was still happening, all that chaos was happening.
Wow.
It wasn't easy because we lived together, we worked together, and we were together 24/7.
A lot of people are experiencing that right now. So whatever helped you all survive that would be a good tip to share.
Space. We've learned that we don't have to be in each other's space all day long. But back then we didn't know how to respect each other's space. And that's, I think, why today it's just so much easier now that we're home 24/7.
Yeah, now that you're back in the same kind of in each other's space all the time.
Yeah, it works, and also I have a servant, I want to serve my husband, and I want to serve my son to make their life easier so they can focus on what they need to do, because my job is to serve my family, in that sense, in making their lives better. And at the same time, I get to do what I need to do.
And I realized that was a missing piece for me in your story, because a servant can only serve when they have the energy to do so. And if we don't put ourselves into the mix to get what we need to feed our own soul, we start running on empty. Yeah, this is what some people call burnout. I call it sort of hollowness. And so that's why I was like, I know that you put yourself back in the mix, because you show up as someone who is not running on empty.
No, as moms, we tend to neglect our self-care,
We can.
um, because we have our tendency, women in general, we just give, give, give. Especially, when you have your kids and you want to be able, you do that, unconditionally, you do that naturally. But if you don't fill your own cup with whatever it is that makes you happy, you can't pour from an empty cup, for sure.
That's true. Can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm really glad that you put yourself back into the mix. What was that really like for you when you made that decision? What did you have to let go of?
Um, Everybody else's expectation of me, who I was as a child to my parents. That's a big one. Um, and I had to be okay with that. If they didn't agree with who I was becoming as their child,
Mm-hmm.
being that I just needed to break from that. Just anybody's expectation, if you will. Just being accepting of who I am. God created me the way I am. Just because, we don't see eye to eye doesn't necessarily mean that I'm wrong. It's just different.
Oh, there we go. Now that's a big statement. Just because we don't see eye to eye doesn't mean that I'm wrong. My mind immediately went to, that must mean that you're wrong. Yeah. Which I don't think was what you meant, but that's the boomerang in my head.
Yeah.
So let's try this again. Just
Okay.
because we don't see eye to eye, that doesn't mean
That I'm wrong or that I'm right and you're wrong and you're right and I'm wrong. We're just different. We just have differences of opinion. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we see in today's society. But as in my own family, my parents, they grew up in a time, they're from the Philippines. They grew up at a time where, culturally it's different, it's different era. So the Filipino culture, they have a tendency to just continue the culture as we move along, but it's different. And I think that was the biggest challenge for me, is because it's not, culturally that, it's just different. But that doesn't mean it's wrong.
right. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It was just not right for you.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's really a key piece, I think. When you're talking about generational trauma, there is an aspect of culture that often gets overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
What is acceptable in certain cultures may not be acceptable once you get out of that culture,
Correct.
and vice versa. What wasn't acceptable in a culture might be perfectly acceptable once you're outside of that. Some people stay in a culture and change the culture. Not my style.
No.
So I picked my battles, and that, of course, what am I doing now? I'm trying to change a culture. All right, never mind. Forget that I said that. We're going to backtrack, delete that one. Maybe we'll edit that piece out, because I just realized, oh, wait a minute, Jackie, that is so not true anymore. I do pick my battles, and it took a lot for me to pick this one. It took a lot for you to pick the battle that you picked, which was, I'm not willing to tolerate this anymore.
Correct.
I'm done. I
Correct.
love it. Just, I'm done.
I was.
Sounds so clean. And yet it was actually messy and took a long time, and the healing didn't happen overnight. So we're not coming into this saying there's a magic wand you can wave and there's a 3-step formula that makes it all better. Yeah. But there are some things that help.
Tools. Yes.
Cool. Favorite tools. What are your favorite tools?
Books. Definitely books,
rattle off the top 2 or 3, because I know you have your favorites. I can see it in your eyes.
Well, the book that stands out the most right now is, Finding the Hero in Your Husband, because I forgot who the author is. Finding the Hero in Your Husband is a great book because I started to be mindful of how, my husband's parents are together, but my parents are not, and I'm married. So obviously there's a difference from how we grew up. So Finding the Hero in Your Husband, The Bait of Satan is a great book because we're in under a lot of offenses. You know, people get offended. Just because we get offended doesn't mean we have to react in that sense. And that's in all relationships.
Okay, so that thank you, because with the title, like the bait of Satan, I would not have expected it to be so immediately applicable
Oh,
to the current day culture. Yeah.
absolutely.
So there was a huge assumption on my part, and part of that's because I came from an evangelical Christian background. That's my grandfather and his
Yes,
grandfather.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. But so what you're telling me is the bait of Satan is about the offensive, the tendency to be offended easily.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
And I've had people say, Jackie, that's what they mean when they say it's a snowflake culture. We're afraid that our children are going to melt if they hear something that they don't agree with
Mm-hmm.
or that upsets them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that look at what offends you.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the message in this bait of Satan? Because now I'm intrigued. I might have to get that one.
So basically people, you know, that's the bait of Satan. People are getting offended. And that's what's destroying, in my opinion, society today, is because everybody's getting offended by political party, and we won't go there. Religion, we won't go there. But culture, right? I think people, you know, I'm a really believer that we're all, you know, we all bleed red, and to ashes we shall return. So when you get offended by the different cultures and, you know, political, you're not giving anybody space to allow them to be freely who they are. And so I'm going to get offended because we don't see eye to eye in or agree. That's not being, you know,
No,
unity.
I call that handing somebody an emotional remote control. I have just given
I
them
agree too.
permission to push my emotional buttons. So
Exactly.
I'm loving this conversation because I absolutely am going to get that book.
Thank you.
Yeah, the idea that we can start to have this conversation that says, what's the problem with being offended? Well, the problem is that you have zero control over your own emotions.
Yeah.
And you're blaming somebody else
Yep.
for how you're feeling.
Yep.
So there's zero accountability. There's a lot of zeros in here that are not positive as far as being able to build a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have certain aspects of our culture that are saying we have to accommodate their offendedness. I'm like, nope.
I don't agree.
Yeah.
I don't agree.
Okay. So I love that. All right. So we've got finding the hero in your husband,
Yep.
which always begs the question to me, does it have a chapter about finding the hero in yourself?
You know, you have to be the hero for your husband as well, for yourself to be the hero, finding the hero in your husband, right? But absolutely, you
Cool.
have to be so it's the title, like the bait of Satan, the title was very painful to you know, just the title itself. It's like finding the hero in my husband, but you know, if I don't like my husband, you know, there's no hero in there. But it really just changes your perspective. You know, it's just a little change in your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that book helped, just like the bait of Satan did too. I'm currently reading Atomic Habits, which is a phenomenal book. But reading books, like just to go back to your original question, is, you know, the one that really helped the most.
Yeah. What we're currently reading is really, really interesting. You're currently reading Atomic Habits. I just finished reading Talking to Strangers.
Oh, okay.
And so Talking to Strangers is a Malcolm Gladwell book. And
Okay.
I have become a fan because he's so engaging in how he shares things. And his skill as a writer is amazing. And his concepts are grounded in real examples.
Okay.
And I had no clue when I picked the book up that the first story was going to have a sentence in it that said, and she was put in jail, and 3 days later, she took her own life and died by suicide in a jail cell. And I went, what the heck? The books are talking to strangers. And at the end of the book, after he tells the presenting part of that story, and he goes through his whole arguments, at the end of the book, he comes back to that original story. Now that he's given us these powers of perception, and he goes back to that original story, looking at it through the lens of these are the conditionings of the two people involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of the woman who got pulled over and of the cop. And these are the conditions they brought to the conversation that each was totally unaware of the other's worldview, the other's point of view. And it escalated, you know, because they were both entrenched in what they believed was true. So I'm always looking for books that will help shift perception away from being locked in. Because that's what I feel is sort of the moral of your story. You could have chosen to be identified with the culture and the chaos forever.
I could have.
And you didn't.
I didn't.
Something changed your perspective and made it possible.
Correct.
And so for that, I am incredibly grateful because you do bring a lot of light with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. So finding the hero in your husband, bait of Satan, atomic habit sounds like a departure. Yeah. So tell us about atomic habits.
So I'm just, you know, I'm starting the second chapter, but just from the start, it just, you know, daily habits in, you know, the habits in your daily life can, you know, just by waking up early, you know, having breakfast, you know, just to be able to have that sense of stability. And also it gives you a lot of having good habits can also bring about a sense of freedom as also, you won't be so restricted.
Have they given you a definition yet of atomic?
Yes, they did, but I don't have that.
That's okay. As long as it's in the first part of the book. I'm a firm, yeah.
It is.
I have read books that had titles, you know, like, you know, who would I be without? And you have to read the whole book to find out what comes after the ellipsis, you know, what comes after the space dot, space dot, space dot. And I'm like, oh no, I am not ever reading a book like that again. You know, it was not going to happen. I want to know what I'm reading up front. So that's my gift to myself, is to give myself permission. If it doesn't make sense to my brain in the beginning, yeah, then it may not make sense to my brain at the end. Why spend the time? So I love the fact that this has brought so much stuff into your world already, just from the first few pages.
Yes, but I do have one more book that really moved me.
Oh, good. What?
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That was a great book. I remember crying because it made me realize the things that I've gone through in my entire life doesn't compare. Well, it's heavy, but just knowing what they went through during the Auschwitz era, it just, you know, surviving psychologically, mindset. It's all about mindset. Man's
Search for Meaning was written through the Holocaust and then published afterwards. And you're right, it is about psychological survival as well as physical survival. Yeah, but that ability to have resilience, I can understand why that book would really resonate with you, because you have demonstrated an amazing amount of resilience in your life.
Thank you.
No, you're very, very welcome. And I am so incredibly grateful for this conversation. Now we're going to have a chance to wrap this up a little bit. What else would you want someone to know if they realize that they're dealing with generational trauma? What would you say to someone who was just becoming aware that maybe that's what they're dealing with?
Wow. There are people out there, right? People or that can really help. Gosh, you don't have to go about it alone. That's,
there you go.
so you don't have to go about it alone. And I think that's the biggest thing, is because, when people tend to isolate themselves because they think, they're the only ones that are going through all the stuff that they're going through, in everything, in anything, everything and anything. And I think that's not true. We're all going through stuff. We're all sharing the same kind of challenges today. But I think that the biggest is that you don't have to go through it alone. There's places, I started my journey with Celebrate Recovery, but there's so many resources out there.
It's really interesting. We're in a time, and one of the biggest challenges of the COVID era is the isolation. And so to have this conversation about healing generational trauma and realize that the exact same piece of what's so important for someone to hear regarding generational trauma is exactly the same as what people need to hear to psychologically survive the COVID conditioning that we're all under.
Mental fortitude.
So you don't have to do it alone. So you don't have to have all the fortitude yourself.
We were made for community, and there is a community out there, that can help support you through this process. You just have to be vulnerable enough to just say, okay, I'm done. I need help.
That's a really huge piece. You have to be vulnerable enough to say, I want help.
Yeah, it's just because your ego that's preventing you from, I'm too cool. I can do it by myself,
I don't want people to know. I don't want, and this is what we hear regarding, why people don't reach out for help on the topic of suicide. And it's the same thing. It sounds like, they don't, I don't want anybody to know. I don't want my boss to find out. I don't want my family to worry.
Yes, absolutely.
So which one was the biggest one for you?
I can do it by myself. I got this. I can help myself. I don't need anybody, because I was a latchkey kid. I was left alone a lot. So that's what I learned, is that I have to do everything on my own.
Got it. So that's a big one. This idea of what we learn. I got this. I think I was 8 years old, and I looked around and there wasn't anybody else around to deal with what was happening in the household at the time. And I'm the youngest. And there just wasn't anybody else who was, mentally, emotionally, or physically available.
Correct.
And so what did I learn? I can do it. I can do it. You had this amazing experience because you figured out this one piece that you needed to heal, this belief system of I can do it myself. You found that very early, Antoinette. And the only reason I can say that is because I was still operating under that system until we took on the mission to make teen suicide a thing of the past. And that was the first time in my life that I took on something that was so big that I knew I could not do it alone. And that's what it took for me to break that habit of I can do it. I can handle it. I can tolerate it. I can get it done. I can fix it. Yeah. And it, for me, that's what it took. It took being willing to take on something so big that I couldn't do it alone. So I am, very much aware that you came to that a lot earlier than I did. And I'm like, yes. So that's why I wanted to know, what did you do? Because I don't think anybody should have to take as long as I did to do anything.
It just, I don't know. I did it because I took myself out of the equation.
Mm.
right? There was a much bigger picture.
Ah, your family,
My kids, for
your
sure.
kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just knew that it ends with us.
So
That's
healing generational trauma is when you decide that this is the last generation.
absolutely.
I love that. Antoinette, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show and go on this journey with me. I so appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I do want to say one more book, The Body Keeps a Score. We don't have to talk about that, but The Body Keeps a Score is about child abuse. So that's
Okay,
another great, great book. Um,
I'm writing it down. The body keeps the score. Got it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much
You're
for the
very,
work that you're doing. You know, I was so happy that we met. Like, I know that we're going to do, you and I will be communicating.
yeah, we're going to do some projects together, and you'll come back on a future summit, and we'll give everybody a report on what we're
Oh,
co-creating.
awesome.
That
I
sounds
look forward to that.
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.